What's up, guys? So I wanted to make another video on the Analogman King of Tone, but I wanted to do something a little bit different this time, something that I think will be a lot more fun and a lot more insightful in terms of understanding how this pedal compares to other pedals. And in the purpose of today's video, that other pedal is going to be the Ibanez Tube Screamer. So what I thought would be a fun experiment is to actually create a track with you guys using both of these and play through some different guitar parts using each of these pedals so you can kind of see how they sit in a mix and how they actually compare to one another from a sonic perspective. So before I get into recording some tracks, I thought I would take a second just to share my thoughts on what makes these two pedals different. So sonically speaking, the Ibanez Tube Screamer and the King of Tone do two very different things. And what they're unique and good for is going to ultimately shape when and how I use them for any guitar part. So let's talk about the King of Tone. What I like about the King of Tone is that it's very transparent. It doesn't have any major frequency prevalencies. And what I mean by that, there's not a lot of boost in the mids or cuts in the low that cut out the bass or anything like that. It's just a very well-balanced pedal that complements whatever your tone is. It's also very warm and responsive. And by responsive, I almost mean it's musical, like it reacts to your playing in the same way that an old tube amp would. And I think that's very characteristic of why it's popular. It's also very indicative of what it was based off of. So there's a lot of interesting history around the King of Tone, and there's a ton of great videos and resources online if you really want to get the in-depth summary of that. But essentially what you need to know is that it was based off of the Marshall Bluesbreaker pedal, and that Bluesbreaker pedal was obviously based off of the infamous Marshall Bluesbreaker, which was essentially the JTM 45 that was made famous by Eric Clapton when he played with John Mayall in the Bluesbreakers in the 1960s. So you take that back and put it into kind of compact pedal form, you're getting a pedal that naturally breaks up, or at least emulates what a natural tube amp sounds like when it breaks up. And that King of Tone does a really good job at that. Now, in contrast to the King of Tone, we have the Tube Screamer. So Tube Screamer is still an amazing sounding overdrive pedal, but it reacts far differently than the King of Tone does. So we just talked about the King of Tone being very transparent, complementing whatever signal you add it to. The Tube Screamer doesn't always complement things. I would say that the Tube Screamer more so colors and brings its own sound and vibe to the mix. So I actually think that's why you hear some people say that they love the Tube Screamer and some people say that they hate it. See, one of the unique characteristics about the Tube Screamer is that it's very mid-forward. And I believe that the low end is rolled off a little bit and the high end is rolled off a little bit too. And it's pronouncing all of those mid-range frequencies. So let's take an example of the most famous Tube Screamer player that we know, Stevie Ray Vaughan, who played through lots of Fenders, right? Now, if you take something like a 65 Deluxe Reverb, they don't have a mid control knob. They just have your treble and your bass. Now, from what I understand, Fender purposely put the mids really, really low when they were making those blackface Fenders. So the reason for that is having very low mids naturally, like having the circuit built around low mids, allows Fender to have a lot more headroom, and it adds to that sparkly clean tone that they've become more or less known for. But when you add the Tube Screamer back into that signal chain, you're reintroducing frequencies that are, not as prevalent, right? That's why it sounds so good. You get this massive almost like harmonic richness that happens because you're adding frequencies that are not there, and you're sort of balancing things out in a really, really nice way. Now, if you repeat that same step to an amplifier that doesn't have cutout mids, things can get really muddy and not good sounding very quickly. And I think that's probably why a lot of people go to a guitar store, grab a Tube Screamer, take it home, and then go, man, I hate this thing. It's just not understanding the gear that you have and what each component brings to the table to try to balance things out. So anyways, that all being said, I think the King of Tone is like a Swiss Army knife that's really going to fit with anything. It complements other pedals, it complements all different types of gear. I think the Tube Screamer sounds amazing, but you have to be much more intentional about what you use it and pair it with. So when I'm making this track, I'm going to try to highlight that for you as I'm coming up with different parts or doing different solos here and there. Really want to build it around the tone that is right for the part, and sometimes it's going to be the Tube Screamer and sometimes it's not. So, I've just been playing around with some drum loops. I mean, look, this isn't going on a record. We're just having fun, just composing and making something fun. So I've been kind of in an Elvin Bishop-y mood lately. I've been listening to a lot of his records. So I think I'm gonna go with something kind of in that Elvin-y Bishop, heavily inspired by track. See if I can make it my own and just try to fill in the pieces as we go. It's just, like I said, this is all just for fun. So it's been a few days. I've got essentially the basic kind of track down, so I'll let you hear that real quick. That's essentially what we got, right? It's a very obscure way of putting stuff together. I kind of like patch down ideas, and then as things kind of start to evolve, I go back and redo them and fill out the full part. So that's what I'm about to do now. I've got like a very simple bass track that's going on. It's like essentially 2 bars, and I'm going to record the rest of the bass all the way through so that we have a full bass. What I'm using for that is this Neve DI box. I find that this thing sounds really good. All right, so bass is now tracked. And now I just got to go ahead and figure out what other guitar parts and keyboard parts and stuff I want to sprinkle in, and then we'll get to pulling up some tones with the King of Tone and the Tube Screamer. All right, I think I've got everything pretty much where I want it. Got a couple rhythm tracks, got the bass done, added in a little bit of a synth. I didn't record all of that. If you guys are interested in seeing that stuff, I will in the future. All right, so just to walk you through a little bit of the rig that I've been using for pretty much every guitar track so far is basically just a Strat style guitar, and then I have an Avatar amp, which is essentially a Fender-esque style amp. It's going into my Universal Audio aux box and using one of the presets that's essentially like a Fender amp. So very Fender-esque. And then I have been using the King of Tone. I have not plugged in the Tube Screamer for any of these tracks yet, but for the King of Tone, I've only been using the red side. So you can see what I have set up now is more or less like an ambient style tone, which I think is going to be really good for this lead tone. So you can see. A lot of delay, a lot of reverb. So I think it's going to go really well with the ambient tone, but you can see not a lot of drive. I'm just kind of pushing the sound a little bit, kind of compressed, but just the red side, nothing too crazy. And that's pretty much been the gist of this whole track so far. Let's do a pass on this track here. Alright, I kind of messed that part up. Alright, so I love that little, right over the A chord, it's... But I gotta figure out... Wonder how that would sound. Control myself so I don't noodle around. So I'm gonna switch over to the Tube Screamer now, and I'm thinking about using this like more of a saturated drive sound. I know you can't see me, sorry, camera angles. But I'm gonna use this for more of like a mid-forward saturated overdrive sound, and it's gonna be for the harmony part.